This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Real quick, if you're into what we talk about here, you'll probably love the free stuff we've got waiting for you at papernapkinwisdom.com. Tools, templates, all that good stuff. It's free. Just ask. You can even head over to social. The link's in the bio.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 264. Today, I am thrilled to welcome back someone who truly embodies the spirit of small ideas leading to big transformations, Todd Palmer. If you've been with us for a while, you'll remember Todd as the founder of Extraordinary Advisors, a leadership coach, and someone who's been through the ringer as a CEO. He came out the other side stronger, wiser, and more intentional. He's no stranger to navigating setbacks and turning them into setups for growth. In this episode, Todd shares a deceptively simple yet life-altering insight. What would it mean for your leadership, your relationships, or even just your mindset today if you lived from the place that Todd shares today? What if instead of feeling overwhelmed by the chaos, you stepped into your role as the creator of meaning? This isn't about toxic positivity. It's about radical ownership. It's about understanding that growth comes not from what happens to us, but how we respond. And that response begins with the stories we tell ourselves. Take a breath and get ready to rewrite your own story. Let's dive in. Todd Palmer, welcome back to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm thrilled to have you back again.
I'm more thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me back.
So this is fun. We were making a joke about John Hamm getting his golden jacket on Saturday Night Live, and you were asking about yours, but you don't need one because you're channeling spring right now. Look at you.
There you go.
You're like a ray of sunshine.
Well, I'm blessed. I got to spend some time recently in Mexico and in Texas where the sun shines as compared to Detroit, which sun doesn't always shine here. Yeah. So I got that. And then, I decided today, I think part of our theme is today was going to be a good day. Everything was going to happen for me, not to me. And I had a 14-hour day booked out, and I started my day wearing black, which is not a good positive color. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to be the energy and the sun that I'd like to cascade into your audience.
That's fantastic. I love it. So if people are just listening and not watching, Todd looks, uncharacteristically for a northerner, tanned and sun-kissed, and is wearing a nice salmon golf shirt.
Yes, sir.
So bringing sunshine into the show. So wanted to make sure that everybody listening can hear that as well. All right. You shared a really interesting napkin for me, and you sort of teased it in your little intro there, but your napkin says, everything in life happens for me and not to me. Why did you share that with me?
Oh, I think especially now we're recording this, in mid-year 2025, there are so many people I work with as their coach where they're acting as if life and government changes and tariffs and life is happening to them. And they show up in a very sad state of being either the victim or the martyr. And I can relate to that. I used to show up that way too. So when I was working with Dr. Friedland, my coach, Dr. Danny Friedland, he gave me a phrase that truly changed my life. And the phrase is this: everything in life happens for you, not to you. So as I was looking at where we are in the landscape of today, for entrepreneurs, business leaders, and just human beings on the planet Earth, especially here in the United States and up where you are up in Canada, there's so much that people feel like is happening to them. I wanted to give a tool to your audience so they can reappraise that, reframe that, and get out of that victim or martyr mindset, should they be having one.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I people like you and I get called on to speak a lot and talk a lot with clients and others people at this time in these kinds of places because chaos creates a lot of confusion. In my mind, chaos creates a lot of opportunity. And I think this is what you're really talking about here. This is the heart of some of what you're sharing. But why did Dr. Danny Friedland share this message with you? And why did it resonate with you so much when he did?
Great question. I was at a place in my life where my business had turned around. The relationship with my son was tenuous. It was improving, but tenuous. And I just would say to him, I just don't understand why I'm not happier. I want to be happy. I'm checking a lot of boxes, the laundry list I had of what was going to make me happy from an external position. And he called it out. He said, well, first of all, if all you're doing is pursuing and chasing happiness, you're never going to get there, because happiness is nothing more than a spike of dopamine. Instead, change the word in your thought process to satisfaction. Satisfaction is part of the hero's journey, whether it's someone from Shakespeare's days, or to someone from the Star Wars universe or the Lord of the Rings universe, whether it's Luke Skywalker, Frodo, or someone from Shakespeare's time who goes on this hero's journey. On that journey, there's highs and lows. It's not all just a trajectory from 0 to 100 straight up the mountain. And I said, well, how do I do that? He goes, you need to tell yourself that every single thing that happens to you in life happens for you, not to you. And he gave me an example of a car accident. He gave me other examples of things like, you're in a car accident, you have the right of way, a car hits you. You don't control that the car hits you. What you do is you control how you react to it. And you can get out and you can go after, say it's a senior citizen. You say, well, weren't you paying attention? What were you doing? Or you say, oh my gosh, are you okay? What were you thinking? Check with them. You can go from an aggressive position to a compassionate position and several other categories in between. But what that does is it puts you back in the position of feeling powerful. It puts you back into the position of not being a victim or a martyr to the circumstances. And then for me, what that does is anything that happens, whether it's I had this happen a couple weeks ago. My flight was delayed not one time, but 5 times as I'm leaving for my honeymoon. My wife and I sat in the Delta Club and decided to start our honeymoon there versus when we arrived in Mexico. And we had some of the most powerful conversations in the 8 years we've been together, because we decided that this delay for weather reasons was happening for us, not to us. So we decided to practice it anywhere we go, because it makes our lives more enriched versus sitting and complaining and whining about things we don't have any control over, like a delayed flight.
I love that. I love how it reframes really quickly what's happening. And what's happening is only my perspective, or your perspective, or our perspective on what's happening, even, right? Because we could say tariffs are happening. Oh, no, there's a change happening, which is really the core of it. And what do we do about it? What do we do next? And it gives us the ability to consider our actions, our perspective, doesn't it?
Right. Absolutely. And the amygdala part of our brain moves 5 times faster than our neocortex. So if we do pattern interruption and we tell our brain, hey, this is happening for us, not to us, it removes what's called the amygdala hijack. The amygdala wants to keep us safe, whether it's around car accidents, whether it's around business, whether it's around flight delays. Your brain wants to keep you safe. That's what it's there for. And so it fires you to the amygdala, but you say, well, wait a minute. This flight delay could be happening for me, not to me. That allows me to re-engage my prefrontal cortex in a way that removes and minimizes that amygdala hijack and allows me to move into executive function. Well, like you said, is this really a danger to me? No, it's an inconvenience. My flight is, well, is it really an inconvenience? You just stay there. Then I can approach the situation, just like in the car accident example, with empathy and compassion versus aggression. I can move into strategic thinking versus reactive thinking. And then I can go into make a meaning of what is happening and create a longer term vision around it. Again, going back to my story about being stuck at the airport, we decided this is going to happen for us, not to us. We're going to make meaning in the moment now. We were there for 4.5 hours on a delayed flight, but we're going to make the best of this situation. And again, Dr. Friedland was masterful at modeling that for me and teaching that to me, even in his final days before he passed away.
How did he do that?
So Danny found out 11 months before he passed away that he had stage 4 brain cancer. This is all public knowledge. He and I did a final interview that's out on YouTube about this. Danny was a big speaker in communities like YPO, Conscious Capitalism, EO, and he talked openly about this. So I'm not telling anything out of school. And he found out during COVID that he had stage 4 brain cancer. And he was a neuroscientist. He knew when he saw the scan, hey, that's he used to call it my runway is short. He's in the hospital by himself. His wife drops him off at the door. She can't come into the hospital because of COVID protocols. His sons are sitting back at home. And I asked him, I said, how did you handle receiving that news? He said, I sat in this bed by myself in the dark, and I mourned the loss of the future life I thought I was going to have. He was a young man, for about 48 hours. And then this is what he shared with me. He goes, then you popped into my head. And all the years I've been telling you, everything happens for you, not to you. And I decided that cancer was going to happen for me, not to me. Over the next 11 months of his life, he put out over 180 pieces of content to teach people how to die. He folded in his boys. He folded in his wife. He folded in people like me to come and be interviewed and communicate and talk and put it out there. He put all of his conscious capitalism relationships. So I always say to my clients, no matter how bad of a day you're having, if someone can decide that stage 4 cancer that is shortening their life is happening for them, not to them, we can overcome anything.
There's so much power in what you just shared, and I don't want to skip over any of it because you just dropped a lot. Danny Friedland, who had been your coach, your mentor for many years, in his moment where he realized his runway was short, in the moment that he was mourning the loss of the life he thought he had, remembered the counsel that he had given you to find his way back. Isn't that fascinating? Like, I think a lot of people who are in the business of leadership and who are leading others sometimes struggle with taking their own advice back. But what a great mirror, isn't it? Like, isn't that amazing?
I say to my clients, I have some wonderful human beings that I get to work with, and they'll say, thank you so much. You've taught me this. Thank you so much. You've given me that. And I'll say, hey, no, thank you. I've learned more from you than I probably have taught you. Because it is a challenge. And if we want to live, at least for me, if I want to live authentically, I can't say to my clients, hey, Barb, hey, Bob, everything happens for you, not to me, and me sit in the Delta Club complaining that my flight's delayed. It's now, there is a space in there where, like Danny talked about, where for about 48 hours, he mourned. He went through his process, and it breaks my heart. He went through it alone. His wife is sitting out in the parking lot or sitting at home, and they can FaceTime, but I'm a big believer in human connection. And so he's not able to have that energetic exchange with his boys or his wife. And that breaks my heart even every time I think about it, because Danny was such a warm human being, such a loving human being. But when we coach people, we have such amazing opportunities to learn from them. And if we live authentically, we live the words we teach, we live the words we coach, and we show up authentic, transparent, and vulnerable, things will come back to us when our clients say, I don't think you're showing up as who you portray yourself to be, or you tell yourself, I'm not showing up who I portray myself to be. But it's a matter of the opportunity presents itself in the room or in the conversations with the clients. And I can't say to you, if I was coaching you, sir, that everything happens for me, not to me, and then sit there and complain about it. I'm literally out of alignment with who I am.
Right. And it's funny how things work around. We were texting on the weekend about a video that you shared with me, and we were talking about how, sometimes when sharing their journeys, some people project something about themselves that may or may not be true, and what makes a valuable coaching relationship. We were sort of discussing what's valuable for people to learn from. And doesn't this all come together a little bit? Because there is a difference between portraying and projecting, but projecting is also, we see the world as we are, not as it is. And if we are able to really understand that this is happening for me, we can project our true energy into that environment, our true choices, our true faculty. And you talked about that, right? That our ability to even access the part of our brain that gives us creativity, empathy, compassion. All of that comes back to us, doesn't it?
It does. And it's what I loved, what I learned from Danny is he taught me how to coach myself in the moments when he wasn't available. So I can do that with the technique. So I say to my clients, I say, my job is to coach you until I'm not available. And then your job is to learn how to coach yourself. And for me, anyways, it's my version of what I call the burden of awareness. When I'm whining and complaining, there's a part of my brain saying, "Hey, you know better. Hey, you wouldn't challenge you would challenge a client to show up differently. You wouldn't put up with this from others. Why are you doing this?" And it's in that space of that awareness that, that doesn't serve me well.
Yeah.
And again, there's a period for mourning for, listen, we're gonna have disappointment. We lose contracts, we lose relationships, we lose family members, we will lose things through the course of our lives. In that space of losing that situation, we have a lot of choices. So many people rob themselves of the choice of what to do about that. What I needed to do for me years ago was resume back into a position of having some control of how I'm going to choose to react to the circumstances that were going on around me, because that's where my power lied. The reality is disappointments are going to happen. Frustrations are going to happen. Sadness is going to happen. How long am I going to wrap myself in it? How long am I going to stay there versus I'm going to give myself 2 days to be upset about this situation. Or I'm going to give myself 2 hours to be upset about my flight. Or how am I going to process that in a way that gets me back? Because ultimately, I want to feel better. And the only way I can feel better is moving out of my amygdala when I know my body is safe and moving into my neocortex to open up different possibilities.
We will lose things in our lives, but really will choice be one of them, right? And that's a decision. You talk about decisions, choosing to chase happiness versus satisfaction. You talked about, Dr. Danny Friedland mourning the life that he lost and then deciding something else. What does that deciding process look like? I mean, I think that's the hard part for a lot of people. People feel encumbered by the weight of whatever's happening, that they feel, I don't have the ability to choose. I am unable to choose. What would you say there?
Love that. Great question. The first thing that comes to mind is Good to Great, Jim Collins, the Stockdale Paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Admiral Stockdale talked about it eloquently in this book about my brutal reality is I'm a POW. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So every day I have to choose. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. They choose, you're in a concentration camp, you're in a POW camp. I'm stuck in the Delta Club. Nobody should feel bad for me, right? But it's the power of choice. And it's not a technique and a skill that at least I know I wasn't taught in school. So it's first and foremost, it's deciding what's not working for me. And for me, feeling like a victim or a martyr around my business 10, 15 years ago, feeling like a victim or a martyr around the relationship I had at the time with my son wasn't working for me. It just wasn't. And I can choose a different path. I don't need to know most people get so wrapped up as, well, I need to know how it's going to play out. I need to know how it's going to play out. Danny decided, I'm going to make the rest of my life the best of my life. He didn't know what it was going to look like. But you let your brain settle and it relaxes. And then the neocortex opens up possibilities. And then you decided, well, I'm going to try this. And it goes like, oh, wow, I don't know how to die. Most of us don't know how to die. I'm going to teach you all how to die. Okay, that would be amazing. Because I don't know anybody. I mean, we can certainly talk about regardless of religious beliefs or thought process or what have you, what it may look like. This is a person who's literally going to document their process of going through it, who's a leading educator, a thought leader in the purest sense, not in the Instagram sense of being a thought leader, but a real thought leader who understands how your brain works and how he has to move from his amygdala to his neocortex. And how we do those things, we get so wrapped up in, well, this is how it should play out. If you look at the active learning cycle, Friedland talked a lot about that. Top of the, think of the active learning cycle like a clock. 12 o'clock is, this isn't what's not working for me. Number 3 o'clock. my intention around it versus my expectation around that, then I'm going to put a plan in place at 6 o'clock, and then I'm going to get feedback at 9 o'clock. And you iterate through that process. So for me, what's not working for me is feeling like a victim or a martyr. So my intention, not my expectation, is I want to feel better. So I'm going to tell myself the mantra that everything happens for me, not to me. I'm going to put that in the feedback loop. Well, that worked out pretty, it happened with business. I lost a client. Well, I don't like that very much, but how's this happening for me, not to me? What did I learn? And then I'm gonna get feedback from it and iterate and iterate and iterate. So there's a lot of different concepts that fold into that process of how to move from fight, flight, and fear to higher thinking to feel living a more satisfied life. I wish there was a more simple answer.
No, but it is. I think that's a really interesting set of steps. Like sort of noticing where you are, noticing the decision that you're really about to make, shifting from intention, to intention from expectation, planning, getting feedback, and then seeing where you're at and repeating the process. Right? It's not. Where have you noticed for yourself that you got stuck in that, where you couldn't get past noticed? I think a lot of people, forget that, and you said it real quickly, that they need to know how it's going to turn out before they take the first step. But doesn't faith have a role in this? Like, taking the first step without knowing where you're going is a big part of it. Just take that step.
It is faith. We can plug in lots of different definitions of faith. For me, it's a matter of I just give up as best I can the need to be right and the need to know the way it's going to go. Instead, I say, I recently spoke at an event, and there was a lot of technical difficulties, a lot of them. Things weren't working and what have you. And I just decided that I'm going to speak from essence, and I'm going to give the room my very best, and the room will give me what I need. I'm going to give up that feeling and the myth of being in control, because we have that myth of being in control. What is it? What does Mike Tyson say? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. It giving up that feeling of control. Now, at the very base of our existence as human beings, we really only want to feel two things. We want to feel like we have a semblance of power and control. And we get that when we feel seen, heard, known, and accepted. When we don't have those things, we don't have safety. We don't trust. And then we feel out of power and control. And that can happen in your brain at the blink of an eye. You can have a fight with a spouse or a fight with a kid. All of a sudden you feel out of control. You feel powerless. It's reminding us, for me, I guess the biggest pivot was to come up with the remembrance that if I root myself in massive curiosity around why this is happening for me, not to me, it slows my thinking down. It's that amygdala hijacking eruption. I got to interrupt it or it's going to run its course. And I've known people, it can run its course for literally years on people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure I've lost more time than I care to mention about it. So here's the other part I think that people get caught up on. And I want you to share what you think about this. When people say stuff like everything in life happens for me and not to me, everybody thinks, oh, that means it's all sunshine and lollipops. Does it have to be good for me? Right? Like, are we assuming then that everything that's happening for me is good? Inherently?
I think we assume that everything that happens to, going back to something you said, everything that happens is an opportunity.
Right.
I think good is subjective. What could be good for you, it could be good for me, it could be different. It's subjective it's subjective in a way where if your business is struggling and you have to shut it down, there's going to be a period of mourning for most people, I think. You go through that period. But how does shutting down this business happen for me, not to me? How does that work? Because if you tell yourself, like I would tell myself, I call it the itty bitty shitty committee. When I was losing my company back in 2006, I was really good at being the victim to all things, and the bank was the evil doer, and my clients were the evil doers, and I was really good at building my list of enemies, but I had no power in that. The reality is, I picked the clients, I picked the bank, and I picked the employees. So who's really responsible for this? It's me. Now, that's not something I came to quickly. So I don't want to portray like, oh, I just woke up one day and I decided to. No, it took a while. And we also, we get reinforcement through childhood. Neural pathways get grooved into our brain of these things, and from the messages from parents and schools and social media and what have you. The reality is anything can happen for you, not to you. So let me step back for a second. Just because I say something happened for me, not to me, doesn't mean it's not painful. I mean, Danny literally told me he wept when he realized his runway was short. I was curled up on a ball and I was in pain, sobbing. That's real. The technique doesn't eliminate that pain. I remember I said to him one time, I was in a previous marriage, and I'm like, I just don't want to hurt. So I don't think I should try very hard. He's like, you're going to hurt anyways. If you don't leave it all on the field, how are you going to feel? He would talk to me in sports analogies a lot. And I said, well, I'm going to feel like I didn't give it my very best. He's like, you will feel better if you remind yourself you gave it your very best, even if it doesn't work out. Because what you won't live with is the pain of regret. You can have the pain of loss of the relationship. That makes sense. But you don't want to double that with the pain of regret sitting on top of that. Blew my mind. So when that relationship ended, I was able to be good with me and clean with her around. I know I did my very best.
That's amazing.
So but people think it's going to remove the pain. It's not going to. It doesn't work that way.
No, so the pain's going to come anyway. And this is what I was trying to get at before when I asked you, everything in life happens for me and not to me. Does it mean, does it have to be good? And the answer is no. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad, or it doesn't mean that it means anything. It's just an opportunity. It's an opportunity to make a choice. So when we say that we want to control things, isn't it a choice to decide that we can try to control an outcome, or we can try to control an action? And there's only one thing that we actually have control over: the action we take, right?
So I see what you're saying. There is before the action, at least for me, I'm not saying you're wrong. Before I take an action, I have to get into a position of awareness that I have a power to make a different choice, which creates a different action for me.
Yeah. What I mean is, yes, there's a process to get there.
Yes.
Right. However, absolutely, you cannot control an outcome. Outcomes are beyond.
You only control your reaction to it.
Exactly.
That is true. That, in my experience, that is true.
So we're talking about this from a leadership perspective, and we're talking about how we feel, right? How we feel about it, how these things are happening to us not to us, but for us, and understanding how to shift, noticing that, moving to intention from expectation, creating a plan, getting some feedback, and then going through that loop again. How do we support our teams to do this? Because I think as leaders, we have to do this for ourselves. We have to shift the perspective for ourselves. But we also need to lead our teams through that. How do we do that?
I think you lead from the front.
Okay.
I used to talk to my team extensively about how things were happening for us, not to us as a company. As a recruiting firm, my old business was a company named Diversified Industrial Staffing. And we were nothing more than matchmakers. We were the, Match.com of the staffing world. I took a candidate, matched it with a client, and then we got paid. Money fell to the bottom. There's so much in that process of trying to get somebody who's maybe looking for a job to work for a company who might want to hire them. We are so much beyond our control. We couldn't. So what could we? That's a result. Getting paid. It was a result KPI. We booked revenue. What we doubled down as what activity KPIs can we control? We're in the middle of the recession here in Detroit in 0809. Nobody's hiring. Unemployment went from 4% to 14%. The one category as a business you don't need is a recruiter. There's plenty of bodies on the street. Well, that was the business I was in. And We had enough business, thankfully, because we had diversified just enough to keep our head above water. So I had a very skeleton staff. And so instead of measuring just the revenue or the placements or the billed hours, we started measuring what were the daily activities everybody did at their desk, because that's what we could control. So we used to literally have a failure of the day campaign. How many no's can you get? Not how many yeses can you get? And we would sit there, and I would sit with the team in the bullpen, and I would lead by example. So I would call up and say, hey, I know you're not hiring, but but when you do hire, what are you going to hire for? It took us about 2 weeks to figure out that language, because we just had to slog through it. So Jeremy's talking, and Lisa's talking, and I'm talking, and we would meet like at lunch, and we meet at the end of the day just to kind of like commiserate, because nobody was buying. And we started hearing the same pattern over and over again, that when we get out of this economic situation, and we will, we're going to be hiring for this type of candidate. It was called a Mazatrol CNC programmer, a very specialized skill set. So I thought, okay, that's what the marketplace is going to be looking for in 6 to 12 months. Great. On the other side of my business, I had Carrie and Becky and other people who were my candidate people. I said, all right, the market's going to be looking for this person. Go build an inventory. Go build an inventory. Then I thought, okay, how is this happening for me, not to me? Okay, I've got an inventory. I'm going to start marketing it back to the potential buyer, so we become top of mind and first in line when they need that person. All of a sudden, the phone starts ringing. Oh my gosh, your guy's exactly what we're going to be looking for. I got approval from ownership to make a hire during a hiring freeze, because these people are impossible to find. I have no idea if the client was ever looking for them, but we were looking for them, and we were stockpiling them, the inventory. That was huge in turning this business around, because I had the inventory. I was able to grab a hold of the supply chain. I got the inventory that you're going to need one day, and we just marketed it back. Versus, well, there's no jobs. Okay, well, we'll just sit around and wait for the phone to ring.
And that speaks back to your point earlier on, to giving up the need to be right and replacing it with a deep curiosity for what's really happening.
Right.
And asking the questions and holding space for the answer, and if you're genuinely curious about what's going on for somebody, they'll tell you. If you're curious because you want to sell them, they know.
Right.
Right. But if you're curious because you're curious and you're asking great questions, you give up the need to be right and adopt a more curious mindset. You're going to get some real information, right?
It's people, I think by and large, people want to tell you the truth, but they don't want to be sold. And, it's so many people. I certainly would put myself in this category for many, many years. I would die on the hill of being right versus being happy. The reality is Johari window 101. There's that fourth quartile in the Johari window where there's a part of you that I don't know. There's also a part of you you don't know. So if I believe that, actually, for me, what I did is I just believe that quartile was the crux of everything. It's the crux of everything. So there's always a part of me I'm not going to know. There's always a part of me you're not going to know. What by ipso facto, I can't know everything, because I have a hidden part to me, and I am me, and I have a hidden part to you. Now, you can have a part of me that shows up that I'm aware that you can put some spotlight on. But if I embrace that, that removes the pressure to always be right. It removes the pressure for me to defend myself and to invalidate you when you call me out on something. So it actually gives me more satisfying life, because I don't have to be right all the time. Because in the reality is there's always a part of the circumstance, there's always a part of the dynamic between me and another person that I don't know about.
And this goes back to your point that Dr. Danny Friedland gave you about chasing happiness is impossible and replacing it with satisfaction. Satisfaction is a worthy goal.
It's the hero's journey. Every journey is a journey of satisfaction. When you get enough, when you get enough money, you get enough toys, you get enough things, and you still feel empty, like most people I run into, it's like, well, so what's really the issue then? Well, the issue typically, at least in my experience, is we're trying to fill in an internal emptiness with an external feed. And that external feed will typically go through us like a sieve and end up behind us, because it doesn't collect, because the emptiness is so vast.
Right. So when we go back to this, everything in life happens for me and not to me, and we talk about bringing our team through that process and modeling it, you also said that you did something physical today to change your state,
Hmm.
right? You were wearing, well, like me, you were wearing black clothing and you shifted it into the salmon clothing. Does that play a role? Like changing your state, does that play a role into this?
For me, it does. It's the power of the uniform. If you're going to go out, I said this to my son the other day. He was like, "Yeah, I came home and I was really in a crappy mood." I said, "Did you change your shirt?" He's like, "Why would I do that?" I said, "Because you're in your work uniform. When you come home, put on your husband uniform." He's like, "Oh." So, yeah, it's literally it's that physical experience of removing one garment and putting another garment on. When I go play baseball, I put on a baseball uniform. I don't play baseball in a suit. It's the body. We have roles. When we go to, back in the day when my staff would come to work, everybody had to wear a collared shirt,
Mhm.
except for Fridays. Fridays, you got to wear a t-shirt. It's like, this is how you show up. People go to, in Detroit, they go to manufacturing plants and they wear overalls with their name sewn on it. That's their work uniform. They don't wear that on the weekends when they're playing softball or bowling. That this is their uniform. No, what they do is they wear a softball uniform. Or when they go to church, they wear a suit and tie, or whatever they do. We as creatures, when we change our physical garb, it reminds our brains that we're not at work or we're not at church, we're at softball.
Yeah, it's really important. And today, in a time when more and more people are working remote, working in
Hmm.
hybrid environments, isn't that even more important, right? To
It's
change your
just
uniform.
I make myself every day. I literally work from home 99% of the time. I come home or I come down in my office and I wear something with, something professional, for the environment. I'll wear a collared shirt or whatever. Um, and it just sets my mindset for the day that I'm in work mode. Also sends a message to my family like, hey, I'm in work mode. So no, I'm not going to take out the garbage right now. I'm in work mode. I'll take out the garbage tonight. Or, hey, no, I can't go do this or this right now because I'm in work mode. I have to announce to them like, hey, I'm on a 3 hour break. If you need anything, I'm available to you. And yes, I'm in my work clothes, but I'll still do it.
Right. So what do you notice? Let's start with you. What did you notice shifted when you followed Danny Friedland's pathway, right? Around things happening for you versus to you.
My relationship with the world got a whole lot calmer. My
Calmer.
relationship, I can be very intense and I can be very impatient. I used to have this phrase when I ran Diversified. It's like, you know, I need it done today. Yesterday would have been better and tomorrow is too late. So it transferred a lot of stress and pressure to my team.
Mm.
And it was the immediacy, the race against the clock. Um, in the recruiting world, we always would say that we're always against a race against the clock because the candidate's only on the market for so long. The company's only going to have an opening for so long. And it's our job to match that have a sense of urgency that exceeds their timelines so that we're ahead of the pack versus being laissez faire. Well, that's okay, I guess okay in the work world, but I would bring that to my home. And it was bigger, faster, more now. Well, that's intense and that's not sustainable. It's like fuel. Danny used to talk about fuel. What it happens for me, not to me, it is a clean burning gasoline to get me from Los Angeles to New York. The way I was operating was on nitrous, a funny car fuel that would get me from downtown Los Angeles out to Compton and no further. It was intense and it was awesome. Then it burns out. And so I felt for me at one point in my career, I was going to burn out. And that wasn't sustainable for my life. I knew it was going to take a toll on my physical part, my mental part, and my relationships. And that wasn't acceptable to me.
Yeah, and the other problem with nitrous is you can blow out the engine, and that's a bigger problem, right?
Exactly. And
So uh, that's interesting. So when you share this with clients, right? When you share this in your work, and I know it's a big part of how you work. It's a version of this I think is woven into our conversations that we've had so far. So I know it's a big part of you, and I know Danny Freeland's a big part of you. So what do you see shift for other people when they do this?
wow, first thing that comes to mind with clients is it's an unburdening to the shackles of the past thinking. They've never considered, oh, wow, so losing a client can happen for me, not to me. Having a fight with my spouse can happen for me, not to me. I can use the active learning cycle and I can reappraise this and I can approach it differently. I can do a mantra to stop. I think so many high performers in my experience are somewhere in their lives, whether childhood or adulthood, they've learned that the harder they are on themselves, sometimes the least kind they are to themselves and others will allow them to perform better.
Mm.
And they will die trying. And as I found as I've gotten older, I just don't have the energy for that anymore. I have a client who's under the age of 30, and I just taught her this is happening for me, not to me. And the look of relief on her face was measurable. She looked, 5 years younger. I'm like, how did that land with you? And I just get curious. She's like, told a story. Well, my dad told me this, and this is how you behave as an entrepreneur. And these are what you do. I'm like, whoa, that's a way to do it. It's a way to do it. You've been doing that since you started your business. How is that working for you? She says, it's not. It doesn't work. And it's impacting relationships with my family, my fiance, but it's also impacting my relationship and how I see myself. She says, I don't like it when I show up that way. So that's important to pay attention to.
Right. I love this unburdening, and I love that lightening that and isn't it true that when we embrace this kind of a philosophy, we also embrace the fact that, the future isn't laid out in front of us. It's not done yet.
No.
Right? And this one decision doesn't mean 40 more. It just means one.
Well, you and I have done this a long time. You help a business lay out a 5-year plan. Lay out a 3-year plan. You lay out a 1-year plan. I have clients that laid out a 1-year plan that by January, because of changes they could not control with tariffs and other government choices here in the U.S., those plans are literally completely null and void.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and they beat themselves up, and their itty bitty shitty committee says, I should have seen that coming. I had clients during COVID who said, I should have seen COVID coming. Really? Tell me why you feel that way. Because they have such an ownership and a feeling of needing to feel power, needing to feel in control, that they should be Nostradamus and be able to predict the future like that. And then we, sometimes as coaches, say, well, you must have a 10-year, a 5-year, a 3-year, a 1-year plan. Set the vision for the company so you know the roadmap you're going to take. Well, I had a roadmap for my honeymoon, and we were leaving Detroit at 10 a.m. We left at 4 p.m. I had a roadmap, but we had to pivot because things beyond my control changed that. It's we as leaders, going back to how do we lead our people? If we handle the blows from government, society, business, family, we show up and we model like, okay, that was the plan. Now we have a different plan.
Mm-hmm.
See, I saw 100 years ago, I saw Colin Powell speak, and he talked in entrepreneur. It was at an entrepreneurship event, and he talked about how we act as entrepreneurs. And it was so funny because you all act like you're making life and death decisions. He goes, I actually make them. Fair point, General. Fair point. He goes, you all act like you need 100% of the information to make a decision. He goes, I make life and death decisions sometimes with less than 20% of the information. He goes, so I have to rapidly iterate, because if I get a new data point and I'm going to send troops over to the right and they're going to get wiped out by the enemy, well, that was the plan, and we're going to stick to the plan. No, I pivot them to the left so that I'm not writing letters to mothers who've lost their sons. He goes, you need to learn to rapidly iterate.
Right. And I think that's so valuable. The thing that's really, I love this unburdening. I love how, even in your telling of Danny Friedland's story, how he unburdened himself in one way, shape, or form. But unburdening doesn't mean the pain goes away. It just means that you can make a choice, make a decision that might give you some momentum in a different direction, right? It gives you an opportunity. It gives you the opportunity to see the opportunity that exists amidst the chaos.
I have a client who recently went through the situation of having to decide to terminate half their staff. It was painful. These are long-term relationships. The reality is they could not afford to keep the entire staff. There wasn't enough business coming in the door, and there was no forecast in the view. Their landscape had changed. And I would say, how is this happening for you, not to you? And there was a lot of resistance. Finally came down and said, well, I've taken a look at the circumstances. I contacted an AI specialist, and I'm able to outsource basically 8 jobs to AI and save myself a couple $1 million in payroll. And I go, well, those people will find jobs. We tell ourselves the story that people will not be able to find jobs. Talked about it in my book. I fired my entire company in one day back in 2006 and started over. All those people found jobs. Did they like me? Probably not. That's okay. I don't begrudge them. It's okay. The reality is I was a single parent. The bank was threatening to take my house, and I needed to survive. And sometimes we have to make different decisions. Fast forward now, because of all that ick in 2006 to 2010 that I, 1, put upon myself, 2, worked my way through. Now I get the blessing of coaching a lot of different people from an experiential standpoint during chaos and crisis of current times.
Right. And, by the way, there's chaos and crisis right now.
There's totally chaos and crisis right now.
And if we really look back at it, though, there's always some version of chaos and crisis.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So, I think there's so much there. I want to end in a slightly different way today than we've done before, but certainly we've done this too. As you know, John Ruhlin passed away 6 months ago, and when he passed away, we started the tradition of ending every podcast with his inspired theme of what you appreciate appreciates, and putting some gratitude into the world to perpetuate his legacy. Where would you like to share some gratitude? Who would you like to appreciate today?
Oh, gosh. Love that. I'm so lucky and blessed. I have such an appreciation and gratefulness to my wife, Jennifer, our daughter, Etta, my son, Tyler, for the guilt-free freedom they give me to go out and live my best life and serving my clients and traveling and going out into the world. And the sense of acceptance versus, I hear this from a lot of people who travel a lot. It's like, oh, you're gone again. You're gone again. That shame and guilt that gets woven into those relationships. They realized and they've supported me when I'm living my best life. It allows me to be the best husband and father for them. And that's ultimately, those are the memories I'm going to leave this earth with. And I'm certainly, I could go on for gratitude and appreciation for hours. In fact, I'm still on my EO forum, and every month we have a 5-minute section of gratitudes and appreciations to express. So I'm all in with the John Ruhlin process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Todd. I know I'll see you again.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. Thank you, Todd Palmer, for returning to Paper Napkin Wisdom and sharing a message that lands with force and compassion. Everything happens for me, not to me, is a masterclass in emotional agility and radical ownership. Here's some of the key takeaways that stood out to me from today's episode. Reframe to empower. When you believe life happens for you, you step into the role of creator rather than victim. Micro decisions matter. A single choice, like what you wear, can shift your energy and your outcomes. You are the thinker, not the thought. Detach from your own inner critic and reclaim your narrative. Look for the gift in the challenge. Asking, what's this teaching me, turns struggle into strategy. And lead from the present. Anchoring in the now gives you clarity in uncertainty. Now it's your turn. What's one place in your life or business where a reframe could set you free, jot it down on a napkin, take a photo, and share it using the hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom. And hey, if this episode resonated with you, subscribe on your own favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so more difference makers can find us. And share this episode with someone who really needs this powerful shift today. One final question for your napkin this week. If everything really was happening for me, how would I act differently today? Until next time, keep leading with intention, and remember, small ideas can lead to extraordinary results. Make it a great day.